My name's Rhys and I, co-founder of Prospect Night. We're a performance marketing agency specializing in online advertising and CRM automations, predominantly for retail, but we do some stuff within the B2B sector. Really pleased to sort of do this webinar because I think as I saw some of the guests that are here, it's probably very something that's very front of mind at the moment for a lot of marketeers and business owners, as this is very much changing landscape in this world. So I don't want to rabbit on too much, so I'm going to pass you over to Conor, who's head of online advertising here at Prospect Night.
Hello. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, Rhys. As Rhys explained, I lead the sort of delivery of all of the online advertising at Prospect Night, and we've made a short presentation which basically goes over what we feel is one of the key challenges in the paid social advertising landscape specifically at the moment, and that is the changing privacy environment. I'm going to share my screen. Working. Brilliant. Cool. So yeah, the online advertising world is really in upheaval due to this change in privacy environment, and increasingly, a lot of what worked only a few years ago no longer works in terms of the sort of strategies and tactics needed to make online advertising campaigns work, particularly on Meta, paid social. But you know, the same principles apply to a lot of the other smaller platforms as well. And consumer behaviour is also on the move, with users increasingly exercising their new privacy rights. Overall, it's having a significant impact, and we're now going to go through some potential tactics that we found are highly effective to mitigate the challenges at the moment. So a quick timeline of events. You can see that over the last couple of years, there really has been quite a few different things that have come together to make the sort of digital environment firstly privacy-centric, and then as the impacts of that on advertisers, that it's a lot harder to track things, and as a result, a lot harder to optimize campaigns as effectively as we used to. So it started years ago with GDPR and CCPA in California, and then you've seen the enhancements of Apple's intelligent tracking convention on Safari, which has restricted the use of third-party cookies and the length of the time that they can be stored on devices and so on. And all of this comes together to make tracking, optimizing and managing campaigns more of a challenge. A lot of what happens fuels a successful campaign on these platforms is driven by algorithms and their ability to optimize to certain conversion events. And when they don't have as accurate data as they used to, that then becomes quite a significant problem. So a quick overview of the Prospect Night approach to driving growth in a changing privacy environment. Step one would be to always utilize first-party data for both remarketing and also lookalike audience building. So we'll go into detail on each step shortly. Always using dynamic tracking templates to maximize click-based analysis and attribution in Google Analytics. So in the absence of a lot of view-through attribution, which I'll touch on later, you can rely on click-based, which isn't as effective, because a lot of what the benefit of running campaigns on paid social and other similar channels is the impact of users seeing the ads. They don't always necessarily click them, but a lot of that trackability of that viewability has been lost. Improving the quality and accuracy of event reporting using the Meta Conversion API tool, and then using brand lift measurement and correlation analysis in the absence of view-through attribution. So for the first step, utilising first-party data for lookalike audience building, I've liked this sort of quite happy image that I've stolen off the internet, but it is essentially you are what you eat. A lookalike audience is based on users and the interactions they've had with your business. This used to be often done with pixel-based lookalike audiences. So you'd have a pixel on your website, a user converts, makes a transaction, and then that user is then sent back to be profiled for the lookalike audience. But in the declining effectiveness of the Meta pixel, this is becoming a lot more challenging. So we would always suggest a move to first-party data-based lookalike audiences. So, for example, if your data is stored in Klaviyo, you can import that directly into Meta in the default integration. And we have found that across all of the clients we've seen do this, it instantly revitalizes their lookalike audiences, because it's quite often that we'd look at an ad account and it's been using the lookalike audience for years that's based on a pixel event, and it's gradually been declining in effectiveness, particularly since April 2020. So that's been declining in effectiveness. And as soon as you then move to that first party data, you see an instant sort of rebound in the effectiveness of lookalike audiences, which are incredibly important for digital acquisition on Meta, for example. So the second element is improving click-based analysis and attribution using Google Analytics. So view for attribution is no longer very accurate. So, in 2015, for example, if a user saw an Instagram ad but didn't actually click it, you could use tools like Facebook attribution to gauge the effectiveness of your campaigns. A lot of that stuff doesn't exist anymore or relies on meta conversion modeling, which I'll get onto later, which is often highly inaccurate. So in the absence of that, you can move to click-based analysis, obviously in the knowledge that viewability still is a factor. And we would always suggest using the Facebook ID tracking to send in a unique ID with each ad click into Google Analytics, and you can join those data sets together to get a really good understanding still of how things are working on the platform. So as an example, on Meta, you used to be able to break your campaigns down by placement, for example. So, what was working for your brand? Was it feed or story? They've taken the transaction reporting away from that within the Meta ads interface. So if you break it down, you can't even see how they're looking to model the conversions. If you do it this way and use the correct UTM tracking to send that data into Google Analytics, you can still get an accurate understanding of what placements are working for you on the platform. And that can be really important because you could invest a significant amount of money in story ads and they're not actually working for your brand. It's really important as well to never completely trust event-based reporting in Meta. So this is reporting either via the Conversions API or Pixel. There is often quite large discrepancies between what you would see on Meta and what you would see in Google Analytics. And the truth is, the truth sort of lies often somewhere in between. The problem is that Google Analytics is limited to click-based only. And then the issue with Meta is that they rely heavily on their own conversion modeling, and that leads to a significant over-attribution of all performance to their channels, which makes, if you purely use the Meta data, you could end up over-investing on the platform, thinking performance is actually better than what it is. What you should be looking for is quite consistent differences between the Meta and Google Analytics data sets. I think this is quite a crude way to look at it, but it's also really important because if you're seeing fluctuations, there probably is some sort of tracking issue. But if you're just seeing Meta consistently reporting figures that are higher than Google Analytics, there is at least some accuracy to their conversion modeling, and it probably wouldn't warrant an investigation into like an incorrect conversion API or MetaPixel setup. So I've mentioned conversion modeling a few times now, and Meta define it as the use of aggregated data from different sources to account for conversions that they're unable to count directly due to various factors, which basically means loss of tracking, cookie limitations, and so on. So currently, Meta will observe conversions, meaning they will accurately see conversions on any iOS device below 14.5, which is hardly any, and any iOS device above 14.5 with ATT consent. So I'm guessing most of you use iPhones. You probably haven't enabled ATT consent, which means you enable advertising tracking on your device, because hardly anyone does. I think the statistics is like 10% of people actually enable that, and in all other browsers and devices. So it does depend what industry you're in, but largely, especially on sort of retail and e-commerce, often it's 60 to 70% of all site traffic will come from Apple iPhone devices, and most of those devices now will be above iOS 14.5. So you can see that often a large amount of those conversions are just not going to be counted in an accurate way due to those tracking limitations. And in the absence of that, Meta will use the data it can see to model the rest. But there are a lot of issues with that because there's no transparency into the process, and just purely for observation of looking at the differences between Meta and what's reported in Google Analytics, you can see that it's quite inaccurate. So one way to move away from the pixel can be to move to server-side tracking, so using the Meta Conversions API. So this basically will send a signal directly to Meta, ignoring the whole pixel process, which can improve the quality of reporting especially as the effectiveness of cookies decline. It's often very easy to set this tool up, and you can see, for example, the split between cookie and conversion API tracked events in the Meta Ads interface as well. So it can be quite a useful tool. Generally, we do see quite a lot of improvement in the accuracy of conversion reporting when this tool is used, rather than just purely using the pixel. And then there's finally some alternative measurement tactics in the absence of view-through reporting. So this is quite a useful one because a lot of the impacts of the advertising that you'll run on social platforms will not necessarily be from the user clicking the ad, it will be from the impact of them viewing the ad. And in the absence of tools that used to exist to more accurately measure this, there's a few other things that can be done. So brand lift studies are a really good tool to run on Meta. So they basically take two different groups, a test group and a control group. One group will see the ads and the other group won't, and then it will track the outcomes after that has happened. And you can see the difference between the two cohorts of users. And it can be a really effective way to try and assess the impact of the viewability of the ads rather than just the click. And we do often see that this is an example from a recent test we'd run with a client, but you can see that the test group was far more likely to have recalled seeing the ads, which is positive to see. And we do often see this across the board, really. It's quite rare that when you run a large brand lift study that it doesn't have the desired impact. So to recap what we've just discussed, the most important things we believe in terms of tactics in this sort of challenging privacy environment is firstly to utilize first-party data. Secondly, to always ensure that you've got strong UTM tracking with dynamic templates set up to maximize click-based analysis in Google Analytics. Thirdly, to always use the conversion API, which builds upon the accuracy of the pixel. And then fourth, to use brand lift measurement studies wherever possible to understand the impact of the view-through attribution of the ads. Thank you very much.